80th session of the United Nations General Assembly has officially opened in New York and will run until September 28th, with world leaders set to deliberate on global peace, security, climate action, and sustainable development. Well, joining us from the UN headquarters in New York is Arise correspondent Adesuwa Giwa-Osagie to tell us some more about what to expect from this year's high-level meetings. Great to have you, Adesuwa. Can you give us an overview of the key developments currently unfolding at the United Nations General Assembly?
Well, good morning, Kachi. You look absolutely stunning this afternoon, by the way.
Thank you.
Now, let's talk about what is happening at the UN today. It is the 80th UN. As you said, we are commemorating 80 years of the United Nations Charter, which was signed on the 26th of June in 1945, just after World War II. It also came into effect of October 24th of 1945. Now, very importantly, Antonio Guterres, who is the UN Secretary General, has said that you can draw a straight line from the creation of the UN to the prevention of a Third World War. The theme for this year is 80 years and more for peace, development, and human rights. So today, to my left right now, we are on the UN headquarters grounds right now, and to my left, there is a meeting currently going on. It is the high-level meeting of heads of states and members of the UN commemorating the 80 years of the United Nations. During that meeting, they're going to have a bit of a celebratory mode, but also a bit of a somber mode because of the current situations going on across the world.
Now, these are very valid points that you've raised, especially relating where we are right now to the prevention and avoidance of World War III. Now, with peace being such a central theme at this year's UNGA, I think it's just ironic that that is the central theme this year because that is exactly what the world needs. What are some global issues that are expected to dominate the discussions right now?
Of course, you're absolutely right. It is dominating the discussions right now, peace and security. It's one of the core reasons the United Nations was founded. Now, the Israel-Gaza war, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and the calls for a ceasefire are dominating conversations and dominating headlines. Very importantly, yesterday, 3 allies of the Israeli state, the UK, Canada, and Australia, announced that they are recognizing a Palestinian state. They've recognized the state of Palestine, and they are also calling for a ceasefire agreement. These are allies of Israel. Now, not all Israel's allies are calling for this because, very importantly, U.S. President Donald Trump has backed Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Also, he rejected, or his administration rather, rejected visa requests from Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and the whole Palestinian delegation. But they're not going to be missing because the UN passed a resolution that would allow them to participate in this session via video. So the crisis in the Middle East, because if we remember, there have been bombs dropped in Syria, there's still crisis in Syria, in Lebanon, and what happened between Israel and Iran, the 6-day war. So all of these are topics that are high on the minds of people here. Also, the war in Russia and Ukraine. Very recently, it's been reported that Russian drones entered Polish airspace, mind you, and Belarusian airspace. So these are the things. Europe does not want to be pulled into a continent-wide war. And so that's one of the things that people are talking about. But apart from these major conflicts that we have, because everyone talks about Russia, Ukraine, and everyone talks about the crisis in Gaza, but there's what people call the forgotten conflicts, the war in Sudan, the crisis in the DRC, particularly in the eastern region. These are crises that are on the African continent also, that are going to be important for the African delegation and also color into the conversations that we're having at the UN.
I'm really glad that you brought those up because I was going to just say, where is the place of Africa in these very, very pivotal conversations? And we know that a lot of the decisions that we will see from this year's United Nations General Assembly will greatly impact the year leading up to the next. Now, let's bring things home. You were present when Vice President Kashim Shettima arrived. You asked him how his trip was. That was a beautiful video. What can you tell us about his planned engagements and priorities over the next few days?
As you said, we are focusing on what impacts Africa and the African continent. One of the important things is that we are expecting Vice President Kashim Shettima, who's leading the Nigerian delegation, to speak on Wednesday. He's the 17th speaker listed for the afternoon session, which is from about 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. New York time. So we are expecting him to go on between 8 to 9 p.m. New York time, which would be around 1:30 a.m. in Nigeria. One important thing he's going to be speaking about is the permanent seat for the African nations on the UN Security Council. When we're talking about war or peace or security, Africa is saying that we are demanding a seat on the table.
I don't know if you noticed, we had a brief disconnection there, and you had been talking about a very pivotal point. Africa's seat on the Security Council, which currently has 15 members. Of course, we know those key players within the Security Council, but for several reasons, legitimacy, equity, and many others, Africa deserves a seat, and you were just pointing to these points. So could you just, elaborate on that before we move on?
Okay, yes. So definitely. So Africa is saying that we deserve a seat on the table. Not even we deserve, it's required that we should have a seat on the table. We are over 54 countries. Now, there are different countries. They want 2 permanent seats for African nations. And so there are different countries that are pushing for those seats. And Nigeria is one of them. South Africa is another. Ghana is another. Egypt is another. We all want that permanent seat. And so part of Nigeria's case is our historic role as the big brother in Africa, our support of independence movements in Angola, our support of the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, our funding of ECOMOG and being a sort of referee in the West African region. So that's part of Nigeria's case for wanting, and also we're the most populous nation. So that's part of our case for wanting a seat at the UN Security Council. But every country every African country would want to have that seat. One thing that is coming up over and over, though, is that they want to give a permanent seat to an African country, but perhaps not a veto power. So we're going to see how that goes.
We're going to see how these goes. I mean, I also imagine that there will be other issues, like other blocs also clamoring for seats as well, resistant from current permanent members. That definitely exists. And most importantly, Adesuwa, Africa's unity and rivalry, because these 2 seats, there's Nigeria, like you said, South Africa, Egypt, amongst many other African countries that will also want to lay claim to this. But let's bring things back home to Nigeria, where Nigeria appears to have a sizable delegation to this year's assembly. So who are the key figures involved, and what roles are they expected to play?
Okay, now we do have a sizable delegation, both from the federal government and from the subnationals. Different states are represented here by their governors, their commissioners, and some advisors to these governors. Now, when we think about the federal government, of course, the Vice President, Kashim Shettima, is leading that delegation. But another key member is our Foreign Minister, Ambassador Tuga, who is here to also have meetings and advocate for Nigeria. The Minister of Health, Ali Pate. When we think about the Sustainable Development Goals, health is a critical sector. And so the minister is booked here for some meetings. We also have our Minister of Solid Minerals, Dele Alake, who is here to advocate, because very importantly, there is a conversation to be had about the utilization of African resources and our minerals to fuel development and growth in other nations. And so that's a major topic that's happening, not just for Nigeria, but across the continent. We also have today our Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Honorable Jumoke Ojuole, is hosting an event today that's trying to connect Nigerian businesses with foreign investors and foreign investment. And the event is going to start in about 2 hours. So the ministers are all here, trying to do their work on the sidelines and also have diplomatic engagement with their peers from other nations.
Well, Adesuwa, I can tell that it's definitely going to be a full day of events, and I'm looking forward to seeing how each and every delegation from Nigeria that has attended this event returns, and I'm sure with not just, great skin from the beautiful weather, because you look stunning as well, but also policies that will effect actual change for Nigerians. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day in New York.